Hi, hello, and welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching. I am Stella. We are recording live on this kind of overcast Thursday morning. I was thinking about how interesting it is to continue to do this thing that I actually really enjoy. I really enjoy making podcast content, and even though it can be challenging and trying to figure out like what to talk about is at times a little overwhelming. I continue to get good feedback actually from other people, and I recognize that what I am doing is making an impact, even if it's a little impact. I have talked about in the past ripple makers, and I really think about my clients and just people I know, right, who have made a difference in their communities and families and experiences by just doing something small. And so this is my small contribution to figuring out the way the world works. So I heard something on the Trevor Noah What Now podcast. He was talking to the Prime Minister of Barbados, and really interesting human. And one of the things that he had said was people don't pay attention to a slow problem. And I was like, oh, dang, a slow problem. That's so interesting. What they were talking about was climate change, and how as long as it doesn't affect you like right now in the moment, people don't pay attention to it, which makes sense. I've been worried about and thinking about climate change for a long time. As most of you know, I am a hardcore recycler, and I try not to use single-use plastic. And I've been doing that for 30 years, right? But recognizing like it's a slow problem that doesn't necessarily have a direct impact or effect on our day-to-day, but over time it does change the dynamic. So it had me thinking about the slow problems that humans have in relationship or just over time. I think I shared with you guys, like I haven't been doing my regular walks, and it's definitely impacting me now where I'm starting to recognize, oh, that's something I actually really do need to do. Though I am doing strength training and some other things, it's a slow problem of aging. And because I'm a 53-year-old woman on, social media, I definitely get a lot more ads for addressing health, skincare issues and whatever. And so I start to recognize that, yes, aging is a slow problem that then catches up to you before you know it. My daughter had mentioned something. She's like, Mom, I'm really grateful that you take care of yourself, and that you work out regularly and that you're conscientious about what you eat. And now that she's at a place where she's advancing in her age and making different choices, she appreciates that I'm working on doing things to take care of myself to stick around and be present and alive. My mom was someone who, would walk regularly. She'd work out. She'd take care of herself. Not so much in her diet, and it is starting to affect her ability to be active and engaged now. I think she's 77. But it is something I've been thinking about, right? So working out, moving my body around, doing those things on a regular basis. And part of it, and I've always said, like, I work out just so that I can continue to move as an aging person. My skin is important, so I drink a lot of water and I make sure to take my makeup off at night and all of those things. But I recognize that some of the slow problems that happen in the dynamic of being human is specifically in relationship. And there's a lot of things that we don't acknowledge or look at or, consciously think this could be affecting the relationship that I have with other people. And it's not until there's a big problem and it's a present problem and it's a fast and quick problem that they then go, oh shit, probably should have addressed that before now. And I'm thinking about, specifically in communication, and you guys know that I work with couples. I work with a lot of individuals who are in relationship who also are acknowledging kind of those slower problems and the long-term consequences of, either their own reactivity or feeling dismissed in a partnership, or not feeling like their significant other or their partner contributes. I think the same is true in friendships. As time goes by and we just get in the routine of doing the same thing over and over, it's not until there's a significant challenge that shows up that we're like, oh shit, I probably should have addressed this before now. Or I should have acknowledged that, like, I can't change or fix this challenge, that it's not mine to fix, right? And it's not until people start coming to therapy that they start looking at it in a different way. Or maybe they have often observed or lived through or experienced something that is detrimental to the bond or connection, and they just don't do anything about it. And a lot of times, it's because life gets busy. It's because we have so many things going on that we're not hyper focused on the problem. And then before you know it, the problem gets bigger. I also think about having relationships with teenagers. A lot of times, because it is their developmentally appropriate behavior, that they pull back and then they're not sharing as much with us. If we are not making ourselves available to communicate with them, i.e. family dinners, it over time, and some behavioral thing will happen and we're like, I had no idea. I didn't recognize that. And then to take it in like a sick and twisted place, like they were the nicest neighbor and then they're like a serial killer or whatever. Water. But these slow problems we don't attend to as often, because either there's an assumption that it'll just go away or get better. We talk about the people who like to just sweep things under the rug. If something happens, we rarely acknowledge it and then just go, okay, it'll go away. And then before you know it, there's a giant pile under the rug, and the room is taken over by the elephant that we have not talked about. And so I want you to evaluate and look at, your own life, relationships, dynamics, whatever. I think about, people who have been in the same job forever, just that minor, slow, paper cutty irritation. And then they have a significant blow up where they may have been saying things all along or acknowledging things that were not the most helpful over time. And it's not until there's a big blow up that they're like, fuck this, I'm out of here, right? I'm constantly in observation of human beings and different things, even in my own neighborhood. So I live in the desert Southwest, for those of you who don't know, and specifically in New Mexico. So, and in the North Valley. I used to live on the west side. And so anybody who's lived on the mesa understands that there is an accumulation of dirt, usually in your windowsills, and there are weeds that are constantly happening. I used to pick weeds when I was a kid, but I learned living with my ex-husband that he would, on a daily basis, every time he left the house, like pick a few weeds, right? And so speaking of a slow problem, like our yard was often well maintained because of that behavior. And so it was a practice for both of us that if we were outside and we see a weed, we pick it. And I was I was raking up my piles of weeds that I have been accumulating over the last several weeks, because it's been really hot and dry, and then it'll rain and everything grows, usually weeds. And it's something that needs to be addressed on a regular basis. If not, then your yard is overrun with weeds. And the same would be true with our relationships, right? With our connections. If we are not fostering them and making consistent effort to communicate or to express appreciation as well as grievances, then things won't be addressed or things won't continue, right? I have talked often about how in raising my daughter, we had family dinners pretty consistently, probably up until she was in the higher grades of high school, because she was working and doing school, and so wasn't available every night to have dinner. But part of the point of having family dinners was to be able to sit down and communicate, to ask about how your day was, what were the good parts, what were the hard parts, what what do you think you can work on? Those kinds of conversations. The same is true with relationships. I recommend, especially when people are coming in at the beginning, to have, weekly check-ins of like, this is what I felt went really well. This is what I appreciated about what you did or how you contributed. This was not my favorite, right? Like we could work on that and do it differently. But if we're not having those check-ins, and so, in addition to, either weekly sit downs, because a lot of times with kids and work and, over scheduling and all the things, it's really difficult to have just like some sit down one-on-ones. But if we are scheduling those to have uninterrupted time together, it is an opportunity to build that connection, right? In friendships, and that I have my friends that I check in monthly with, but they're people that I've spent years with. And so it's really nice to be able to have those monthly check-ins where we go to dinner or lunch and we, kind of talk about what we've been going through or what our struggles have been, what have been our wins or successes. And it's nice to be able to have those interactions so that we are not letting time happen. And then before you know it, we've created big rifts or broken away or eroded at that connection with resentment or anger or frustration that we've been holding on to. I had a conversation with someone, I think last night we were talking about the retrograde, and I was talking about my drive back from Denver and how I had a lot of time in my head to really go over the last year, as it was my birthday last weekend, but also go over just some of the dynamics and behaviors, my own behaviors and choices, and things that I want to avoid moving forward, or things that I want to have more of, and to repeat or build and invest in those connections. And so they were talking about, like, do you think it's helpful to kind of ruminate or go over past experiences often? And I was like, well, I mean, I think it's helpful to look at our past behaviors and evaluate, relationships and dynamics, but it's not helpful to like live there or to continue picking at an old scab and this is just who I am, or this is just how I've been and I'm a terrible person. Like, that's not helpful. Because if you're not going to choose to change or choose to eliminate some of the parts that aren't working, then it's not going to grow. Right now I have 4 plants, but I've historically been a plant haver. And in order to get things to continue to bloom or to grow new parts or whatever, sometimes we need to cut off the dead parts. Sometimes we need to repot something. Sometimes we need to, add fertilizer or plant food. But if we don't attend to them, either they will get overgrown, the slow problem will get bigger, or it'll just die, right? The connection will die. And so there's an opportunity where we need to start to pay attention to some of the things that have eroded at those connections, or some of the things that have eroded to our contentment in a situation, or getting the satisfaction from something that we used to get and that we're not getting anymore. Then we need to kind of change it up or look at, how do I do this differently or better so that I am getting the most out of the time that I am spending both in this dynamic, but also on the planet, because I think there's a lot of us who just go through the motions, ignoring the slow problem, acknowledging every once in a while that, yeah, that climate change could be a thing. But, and as I sit in a 70-degree day in March, that just feels weird. We had 78, like we got to up to 79 and 80 in February. And New Mexico's weather is kind of all over the place anyway, but it's something to pay attention. It's something I've often paid attention to, right? But there are definitely other things where I just like dismiss it, or, pretend like it will go away, or just like put it on the back burner. And then it does, right? It does either go away or it gets worse, right? It'll turn into an abscess or an infection, or it'll then turn into a fast and quick and difficult problem. And so I want you to think about that, right? Think about the things and evaluate how I got here. So, taking accountability for my own choices and behaviors that have gotten me to this place. And if this place is good, then how do I continue that, right? But if this place is not good and I am dealing with some resentment or some frustration or some anger, then what do I need to address, right? Some things are going to be done and that's okay. It's good. There's a period of grief. There's a period of sadness. There's a period of hurt. And then they're done. Like we trim away at those unhelpful parts. I did an episode at this point years ago about deadheading the roses and how a rose bush needs you to actually trim off the dead parts so that it will reroute the energy to the things that are going well. And I think that's true for humans and relationships, and certainly ourselves. If we don't address the things that aren't working anymore, we talk about refreshing your look or, changing some of your behaviors. I'm a I'm a classic girly. Like, I like to wear the same things for years because for me, that's just what I feel comfortable in. But every once in a while, I like to get some new pieces. I like to change it up. In terms of our health, really recognizing as we age, as we get older, if I'm not looking at the slow problem of how my knees are working or how my body feels in my clothes, then it will continue to be an issue. So it would be helpful to kind of evaluate, like, what are my goals? What do I want to do? How do I want to feel? Not just today, but, several years from now. And it's important to start to evaluate that with our experiences and certainly with our connections, with our relationships, is like, is this relationship dynamic still working or is it getting stale, right? Are we doing the same things every Saturday? And so do we want to do something different? And do I want to do that with you, right? Do I want you to be the person that, and a lot of times we get together with someone and we think, oh, this is going to be our forever situation. And over time, we go through hard and challenging things. We experience changes and evolution in our own day-to-day, and then it doesn't fit anymore. Or we have to rebuild the connection, repairing some of those damaged parts of like how we've communicated with each other, what we've said, what we're holding on to in terms of resentments, and how do I want, you to be with me, this version of who I am right now, and how do I want to be with you, this version that you are today. And sometimes we have to really evaluate with our truthy eyes what is happening in that other person's experience, to have empathy and compassion, but also have patience if this is still a connection that I want to participate in, right? Really acknowledging that we go through our own experience day to day. The minute we separate from one another in the morning or go to our jobs or in the evening, whatever your shift is, and then I have my own experiences out in the world, right? And then I come back and it's my responsibility, it's my duty, it's my, it should be my goal to want to share that with another person, to be able to say, hey, this is my experience. This is how it changed me. This is how, the things that are happening in the world are affecting me. And I want this to be a safe place for me to come back to. I think oftentimes, people, if they're not having those evaluative conversations or, connective points of where, what are our goals? How do we move forward? Then we keep going in this autopilot way, and the resentment builds and the anger builds. And then, I don't want to connect with you. You don't know who I am, and we don't share anything anymore other than, a mortgage and the last name. And so it's helpful, I think, to evaluate those slow problems and look at them again with your truthy eyes, telling yourself, being honest with you, being honest with, like, how am I showing up in this situation? What am I doing to contribute to our disconnection? And then how do I build rebuild that repair so that we continue moving forward? I've worked with a lot of couples in different ways. And, what I know to be true is that people go through years and years of really hard things and they hold on to it. Builds up like a plaque, like a calculus, or like, what's coming to my mind is like, the high cholesterol that turns into plaque in our veins and arteries that then, can turn into a bigger issue. And if we don't address it, right, if we don't start thinking about it, if we don't evaluate it or look into it, then it becomes, kind of a deadly issue. And our bodies change over time, just like our relationship dynamics, just like our connections. And if we don't have those conversations of, hey, I feel disconnected from you, or I feel like we haven't shared time, and it's not until you end up in a therapist's office or a lawyer's office, then do you recognize, oh shit, this isn't working anymore. Now, for those of you who are a lot more verbal and communicative about your challenges and issues, and then if something doesn't change, or it changes for a little bit and then people go back to their default setting, then it's up to you whether or not you want to keep playing that game, right? It's up to you whether or not you want to keep staying in a situation. And that could be, like I said, it could be a job. It could be a living situation. It could be, the same car that you've been driving forever. And it could be your outfit, right? It could be the way that you dress and the way that you kind of get ready in the morning. If you want a change, if you want something different, then that's where we have to evaluate, like, is this still working the way that I want it to? And for some people it is, and that's fine. We talk about the people who will live and die within, 15 miles of where they were born. And for those people, it works. And for other people, the idea of dying 15 minutes from where you were born is terrifying. And so those are adventure people, right? Those are the people that go out and, have different experiences. And we're all different. Like, it's not a guarantee that we're all going to behave the same way. But what I know to be true is often those slow problems that we are not addressing or looking at will eventually turn into big problems. They will turn into bigger challenges. And then something significant will happen and we'll be like, oh shit, I had no idea that anything was wrong. Well, yes and no. I mean, I feel like some people are like, if nobody's saying anything, again, if it's not broke, don't fix it, then they won't address it. It won't get fixed. But that's not really helpful for those long-term, situations and circumstances that we want to continue growing from. And it's curious to me how many people will get through the early part of their lives and go, I had no idea there was a problem. Why did you not have any idea? I didn't realize that, that thing that was growing on, my back was then becoming a cancerous, lesion of problems. Because a lot of times those are things we're not looking at, right? I don't know that there has ever been a benefit to sweeping things under the rug, but people do it. And what I know to be true is, like, once that pile under the rug gets to be big and becomes the elephant, then sometimes it's not in a place where we can repair it or fix it. So this is your reminder today to maybe take a look at some of those things that you have been avoiding or not looking directly at, or have considered a slow problem. I'll deal with it later. Maybe we look at those. Maybe we have those conversations. Maybe we try to recognize, what do I want moving forward? Do I see myself in this position a year from now? And if I don't, or I want to see something different, then how do I change it so that I can have a different situation moving forward, right? How do I take accountability for my part and my choices, but also how do I communicate my needs and expectations to another person so that we can change this dynamic? How do I grow in a job that I love, but I have gotten stale or bored with? Those are things to evaluate and to consider so that those slow problems don't become big, burdensome, expensive problems later on. All right, there's your nugget. Had a wonderful trip to Denver and spent time with my daughter and my son-in-law. And I got to see my niece and her family, which was really crazy and cool. I had a nice drive and I had some time both in my head and then also listening to some great podcasts. And so there is your nugget. If you want to hear anything from me or want to learn more about something, you can reach me at lx2.cod.coach@gmail.com. Thank you again to everyone who's listening all over the planet. It is often humbling. And yeah, if you want to get a copy of the book, it's Best Intentions, The Things We Do for Love. You can get it anywhere you get books, Amazon, Dorrance Publishing, Barnes & Noble. You can reach out to me and get it from me. So there's your nugget. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.